Welcome to another story made by Oracle 1. The first time the crows spelled my name, I thought it was just coincidence. Out here, in the flat lands of Barlow County, birds gather on the telephone wires like beads on a string, black silhouettes against pale skies. They shift, they chatter, they move as one. Nothing unusual in that. But on that March morning, when I stepped out of the feed store with my bag of seed and looked up, the letters hung above me plain as print. JONAH. 5 birds to the J, 4 to the O, curving into that unmistakable pattern, then on through the N, A, and H. Each time one shifted its wing, another swooped down to correct the line, as if they were spelling with purpose. I stood there until my breath fogged the air and the old men across the street fell quiet mid-story, their cigarettes trembling in their fingers. Then one of the birds gave a sharp cry, and they all scattered at once. "You see that?" someone murmured behind me. I didn't answer. I just watched the black dots vanish into the clouds. Word spread fast. In a town like ours, there wasn't much else to talk about. Within a day, everyone knew the crows had spelled my name. By evening, when I walked into the diner for supper, conversation stopped. The waitress, Mary Lou, who'd gone to school with me, hesitated before pouring my coffee. "Jonah," she said softly, "you hear what they're saying?" I shook my head, though I already knew. "They say when the crows spell your name," she whispered, "something's coming for you." I laughed it off, because that's what a man like me does. I run the hardware store, go to church on Sundays, fix my truck when it breaks. I don't listen to superstition. But that night, I dreamed of wings. I was standing in a field of wheat under a gray sky, the stalks dead and dry, whispering like bones. The crows were above me, forming letters in slow, graceful loops. But this time, they didn't stop at my name. They kept going, spelling words I couldn't read, too fast, too strange. Then the field caught fire, and the sky turned red. I woke with a start. My window was open. On the sill sat a single crow, staring at me. I threw a shoe at it, and it flew off. The next morning, I found black feathers scattered across my porch, arranged in the rough outline of an A. That's when I started to worry. At first, I told myself it was pranksters. Kids from the high school, maybe, playing games. But every morning after that, I found new feathers laid in careful patterns, first N, then D, then an E, Andy, I muttered, crouching to look closer. Then it hit me. Anders, my brother's name. Anders had been dead 3 years. Heart attack in his sleep. He'd been my only family left in town. That evening, I drove out to his old place. It sat empty now, half the roof caved in from a storm. The air smelled of rain and pine resin. I parked and stepped out, and there they were, dozens of crows perched on the fence, the roof, the rusted mailbox. Their eyes glinted like beads. I stood there a long time, feeling the wind on my face. "You spelled my name," I said. "Now his. What do you want?" The birds didn't move. Then one of them hopped onto the mailbox and gave a sound that wasn't quite a caw. It was lower, raspier, almost human. I got back in my truck and drove home fast. That night, the dreams came again. I was a boy, walking through the fields behind my father's barn. Anders was ahead of me, calling out something I couldn't hear. Then I saw crows gathering on the scarecrow's shoulders, whispering in voices that didn't belong in any bird. Their eyes turned red, and one of them spoke my name. I woke with a start, drenched in sweat. I decided I needed to see Reverend Holt. He'd been the pastor at Barlow Baptist for 40 years and had a way of talking that made even the strangest things sound simple. When I told him what I'd seen, he frowned. "Crows have always been messengers," he said finally. "Old as time. Could be warning, could be omen. Of what? Death, sometimes. Change. Depends who's asking. They spelled my dead brother's name." His eyes flicked up. "Then maybe it's him that's asking." I left his office uneasy. Over the next week, the crows came daily. They perched along Main Street, spelling not just my name but others too. We all saw it. Lena, Ruth, Thomas. By Friday, they'd spelled 5 names. And by Saturday night, 3 of those people were dead. Lena Hart had driven off the bridge into the creek. Ruth Carlisle had fallen asleep with a lit cigarette. Thomas Briggs hadn't woken up at all. The whole town went silent. The next morning, the crows spelled another name, mine again. That's when I stopped pretending it was just birds. I drove out to the fields, following them as they moved west. The air was thick and still, the horizon red with sunset. The crows led me to the old family cemetery, the one behind my father's barn. It hadn't been used in decades. The gate hung crooked, weeds grown high around the stones. And there, perched on my brother's headstone, was a crow larger than any I'd ever seen. Its feathers gleamed oily black, its eyes a deep, unnatural gold. "Anders," I whispered. The bird tilted its head. Then it opened its beak and made that same rasping sound. But this time, I could understand the words. Not buried. My heart pounded. What? It cocked its head again. Not buried. Me. The world tilted. What do you mean? I whispered. You are buried. Right there. The crow let out a sound like laughter, harsh and hollow. Then it spread its wings and took off. I stared after it, breathing hard. The name on the headstone blurred in my vision. I reached out and brushed the dirt away from the base, and that's when I saw it. The ground had sunk unevenly, like something had been disturbed beneath. My skin crawled. I ran to my truck and grabbed a shovel. I don't know what possessed me to do it, only that something in my chest said I had to. The sun slipped below the trees as I dug. The soil was soft, wet, and it came up in clumps. I dug until my arms ached and my breath came ragged. Then my shovel hit wood. I froze. The coffin lay tilted in the earth, half collapsed. The smell that came up was thick and rotten. I gagged and pried the lid open. There was no body inside. I stumbled back, shaking. The grave was empty. The wind picked up then, carrying the sound of cawing. I looked up. The sky above the cemetery was black with crows. They spiraled in a slow, perfect circle, wings beating like thunder. And in their movement, I could see it, the shape of letters forming again. Jonah. My name. I dropped the shovel and ran. I barely remember driving home. The road blurred past, my headlights cutting through the darkness like a blade. When I burst through my front door, I locked it behind me and turned on every light. But light didn't matter, because the crows were already there. They filled the trees outside, hundreds of them, their bodies swaying on the branches, their eyes reflecting yellow in the porch light. The sound of their wings filled the air, a whispering chorus that almost sounded like words. I pressed my palms to the glass, staring. Then I saw movement at the edge of my yard. A man was standing there. He was tall, shoulders stooped, face shadowed beneath the brim of a hat. I thought for one terrible second that it was Anders. The shape of him was the same. The way he tilted his head, the way he stood with his hands half clenched. I opened the door before I could think. Anders? The man didn't move. Then, as I stepped onto the porch, he lifted his head. His eyes caught the light. They weren't human eyes. They were gold, like the crows. His mouth opened, and when he spoke, the sound that came out wasn't a voice. It was the same rasping call I'd heard in the cemetery. I stumbled back inside and slammed the door. The sound of wings thundered against the walls. The crows were slamming into the house, the windows, the roof. Their cries filled the air, deafening. I covered my ears and crouched in the corner, trembling. Then, all at once, it stopped. Silence. I waited, listening. The air was still again. I rose slowly and went to the window. The trees were empty. The man was gone. The only sign they'd been there were the feathers scattered across my yard, so many that they covered the grass like snow. I should have left then. Should have packed a bag and driven until the town was nothing but a memory. But when morning came, I found something new. The crows had spelled another name. This time it wasn't mine. It was Reverend Holt's. By evening, the church bell rang once, and they found him lying in the pulpit, eyes open, skin pale as wax. No marks. No cause. That's when everyone started leaving town. In a week, half of Barlow County was gone. Those who stayed barred their doors, refused to look up at the sky. But it didn't matter. The crows came anyway. Every morning, new names appeared. First spelled on wires, then rooftops, then in the patterns of seeds dropped across driveways. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I just watched. Then, one morning, I woke to find the crows sitting on the fence again, still and waiting. For a long time, they didn't move. Then, one by one, they began to arrange themselves, letters forming, slow and deliberate. But this time, it wasn't just one name. It was every name left in town. And when they finished, they rose as one black wave into the sky and flew west, toward the cemetery. I followed. I don't know why. Maybe because I had to see where it ended. The road to the fields was lined with feathers. The closer I got, the darker the sky became, until it seemed night had fallen even though it was barely noon. When I reached the cemetery, the air was thick and humming. The crows circled above like a storm cloud. And in the center of the graves, the earth had split open. Something was moving there. Shapes pulling themselves out of the soil, gray and half-formed. Not birds, not people. Something in between. Their faces were stretched and smooth, eyes like golden glass. Their mouths opened and shut in silence. I stumbled back, choking on my breath. Then I heard a voice behind me. Not buried, it said softly. Not yet. I turned, and there stood the tall man again, the one with my brother's shape. His eyes glowed faintly, and in his hand was a black feather. He held it out to me. Take it, he said, though his mouth didn't move. The voice was in my head. It's your turn. I backed away. No. The ground beneath me shifted. Something cold wrapped around my ankle. I looked down and saw a hand, pale and boneless, reaching from the dirt. I screamed and tore free, running toward my truck. The engine roared to life, and I sped down the dirt road, the crows screaming above me like a living storm. I didn't stop until I reached the highway. I didn't look back. That was 3 months ago. I live 2 towns over now. I don't talk to anyone. I don't look at the sky. But last night, I heard them again. A faint cawing outside my window. I tried not to check. I really did. But this morning, when I stepped outside, I saw them lined on the fence, black shapes against the dawn. They were spelling again. Not just my name this time. Yours too. For more stories, like and subscribe.